Welcome everyone to the Ridgefield Playhouse Diversity Film Series. My name is Cheryl Washington and I'm proud to be your host once again. We had a lovely series this past year and we're going to do it once more. This time we've got our bonus content where we're discussing our very first film of the season, Minari. Can't wait to talk about it with our special guest. Joining us right now is Dr. Joliana Yee, who is the Assistant Dean at Yale College, as well as the Director of the Asian American Cultural Center. Hello, Dr. Yee.
Hi, Cheryl.
Nice to have you here. Thank you so much. And also, Kyung Yoon is joining us. She is the president of the Korean American Community Foundation. And I have to just say something very personal because she and I go way back. I don't want to just say how old I am, but we go way back to journalism days at Fox 5 in New York City. And it's nice to have you on the screen, Kyung. I'm not seeing you in a long time, so it's good to have you join us, you and Joliana. So happy to have you here. Thank you, ladies, for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
It's wonderful to be here.
Thank you so much.
Great to see you again,
Oh,
Cheryl.
that's lovely. Thank you so much. Before we get into the discussion of Minari, which I loved, I just want to ask the two of you if you could separately just give us some background about your respective roles with your foundations. If you can start with us, please, Dr. Joliana Yee with the Asian American Cultural Center. Just give us a little background on that, if you don't mind, please.
Sure. As briefly as I can be, the Asian American Cultural Center is one of 34 in the entire country. There, in terms of on a college campus. So the Asian American Cultural Center's main mission is to serve the Yale population as well as the surrounding New Haven communities. Our target population are largely undergraduate and graduate and professional students. And it really serves as a place to advocate for Asian identifying students' needs within the Yale University community, but also to educate those who don't identify as Asian about the distinct needs and cultural nuances and the richness and history of the Asian experience in the United States. And I've served as the director for 4 years now. So it's been an extreme pleasure and also challenging in these COVID times.
I'm sure there are many challenges, but we like to say that those challenges will never outweigh the positive triumphs, I'm sure. Okay, Kyung, what about you as far as the Korean American Community Foundation goes? Could you just give a little bit of a thumbnail sketch for us?
Sure. So KACF, the Korean American Community Foundation, was founded 20 years ago. We're actually celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. I was actually one of the co-founders. So this has been a long and important passion for me. We were founded by a small group of Korean Americans who recognized that there were a lot of needs and struggles in our own immigrant community, but often they were rendered invisible and off to the margins just because there were no voices, and also because of prevailing stereotypes like the model minority, that all Asians are doing so well. And it's true that many are, but at the same time, there were also a lot of resources that we're not getting to community organizations that are helping the underserved and the most vulnerable, because there was a lot of just issues being rendered invisible. And so we started our community foundation really with the idea of not waiting for others to come and rescue us, but that we also had the power to organize and to strategically start to build and flex our philanthropic muscle. And we just none of us were millionaires or anything, but we started giving and asking friends and using our voices. And I'm really proud to say that, we've gone from our first year of grant making in 2003, where we cobbled together about $60,000 that we gave to 5 community organizations. And we're really proud of that. This year, we just gave out $1.8 million in grants, and we've become one of the largest funders of Asian American community, needs in the greater New York area. So it's been a really incredible incredible journey. I have to say the story of Minari, of the struggles of immigrants really resonated for me, and the work that we do, because these are people that are really visible to us. So I really look forward to the conversation.
Well, you were just getting right into the question I was going to ask, first and foremost, about how it resonates, because we're talking about a film, to me, that is just so brilliantly written and directed and magically acted. Just an amazing piece of artistry, I have to say. And even though we just had a chance to see it and we just allowed our audience to view this magnificent film, I have to confess, full disclosure, that I saw it about 3 times. When you're at home and in the middle of COVID, you can sit and you can screen movies ad nauseum. But this is one of those films, as far as I'm concerned, that really does resonate with not just a certain culture, but it just manifests itself on many, many levels. Let's talk about that, because you just talked to us with a word that just kind of hit me. You said voices. And this does really speak to so many of us. Tell me why both of you feel that this is a film that has so much importance and really does resonate with more than just an Asian community. I'll start with you, Dr. Yee, if you don't mind. If that's all right.
Sure. I feel bad going first all the time. I think, in terms of, for me, I think the last, I would say 5 to 10 years, the Asian American representation within like popular media, whether it's music or film, has just really exploded. And it's definitely an exciting time. I think for me, Minari in particular highlights I would say a segment of the Asian American experience that isn't often thought about. For me, I came to the U.S. as an international student. So my experience as an immigrant is quite different, because I came here, pursuing a degree, which obviously highlights a specific class experience. Whereas for the characters in Minari, I felt like their class experience was one that is not often told or highlighted or seen especially on the big screen. So I thought that was really special. I loved how the grandma just had, just not your typical grandma.
She had a lot of spunk, didn't she?
Oh, I loved it. And I loved that the little kid was like, "You're not like a typical grandma." And there's kind of that back and forth and playful relationship. And, and there was no stereotypical character. And I really loved that each character kind of was struggling with their own kind of imperfections, on an individual level, but on the larger scale, it's just showing what the hardships and the difficult kind of, I would say, life choices that families have to make when they're trying to reach what they see as success. And how does one even define success? I think, is really a question that anyone can relate to, regardless of race. And I think that's what makes the Minari family so relatable, regardless of whether you're Asian or not.
So agreed. Kyung, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I will say, like, what was so exciting about seeing this movie was that the characters were really human beings. And I think for the Asian American community, we're not used to seeing fully drawn, complicated characters, because if you think about it, right, like in terms of popular culture, if you see Asians at all, for a long time, we were just like the sidekicks or the stereotypes, or
not too different from African American players too,
or or that fellow that Mickey Rooney played in Breakfast at Tiffany. I mean, just really can be very offensive, but also very flat. Like one dimension, one stereotype, because often the writing is done by people who don't look like us or don't know our experience. So I think really Minari just was able to deliver, something that was fully human. And I think so all of us, whether you're Asian or not, could relate to these characters. And so I think it was exciting for that. And hopefully it is the beginning of, of many more stories. I hope there will be one on international Asian students, because like that can be yours, because Minari's story is not every Korean immigrant story either. Just like Crazy Rich Asians was not every Asian story. It was fun, and it kind of like break through, and it was a box office success, and so that was fantastic. So we're just like really seeing so much more hope and visibility. And I would just say the last thing is that we're also seeing a rise of films and like Squid, then also TV series like Squid Games, Parasite, entertainment coming out of Korea also, but this is different because this was Korean American. It was a story that is uniquely immigrant specific, and that's why it was kind of a slap in the face when the Golden Globes, like, they put it in the category of foreign language film, just because so much of the dialogue was in Korean, which it would be. But it was not a foreign film. It was a uniquely American film.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you pointed that out. And by the way, we should also mention that the film was nominated for 6 Oscars, and it did win at least one supporting actress, which was but did you not love what she said when she accepted the award? I mean, I thought that she was just so stellar in her remarks. She just really was so humble, and the fact that was it her son? I think she had said, "Oh, he told me to do this, and I had to work hard for this." And I just thought that it almost mimicked her character because of the brashness that she exhibited. I just thought that she was a phenomenal actress, and also just in terms of how she gave breath into that character. Is that typical or atypical of most grandmothers that we see in the culture? Because when I speak about my own culture, we don't see our grandmas like that.
Well, I think a little bit of context is that Yoon Ye-jung is a very revered actress in Korea. She has had a long career. She's really well known. But
not only that, she was also called the Meryl Streep of Korea. I don't know if that's true.
I think her stature is really akin to that. But and then for this was a low budget, like a film that I'm sure she didn't get very much, and she had to like work under certain conditions. And I think but hey, it led to her getting an Oscar. And I think it's just that also like it created a platform for so many actors. Steven Yeun, who was the father, like, he also was nominated. I mean, you just have to have more vehicles for people to be able to show off their stuff and to get nominated and also win. But the nominations themselves, like, that was amazing.
Very impressive. Could this film have been showcased even 20 years ago? Do you think that we would have the same kind of attention that it would garner if it had been done sooner than later?
I think so. I mean, I think that the Asian American population and the interest in the Asian American experience has always been there. I mean, I think a similar question was asked about, Marvel movies like Black Panther and Shang-Chi. Like, is there an audience? And for so long, people wanted that, but it was the industry that hesitated because they weren't sure. And, thank goodness for Black Panther and how well it did in the box office. It kind of opened the doors for other, people of color. And I think that's, very similar to a lot of the history in the US, where Black folks often open the doors for other people of colors and their struggle. And so I think it would definitely showcase in the same way. And in fact, I wish it had happened sooner, but and I think to kind of go off of what Kyung said earlier, about the fact that we have so many more movies, I think it kind of gives us an opportunity to relax. Because I think when we've only had one or two, like Joy Luck Club, that was the one Asian American movie for 2 decades over, and every Asian American would have something to say about it, and most people were dissatisfied because they didn't always feel that they were represented in that movie, because that was the only movie. And there's no, it's not possible for one movie to represent every Asian American experience. So in actuality, it makes, I think, the directors and the actors' jobs a little bit easier when we can have many narratives out there, so that we can see different types of grandmas, not just one type of grandma or one type of dad or one type of mom. Or one type of family unit or story. And I think it just, expands the richness. And I would say that there's still a heavy East Asian emphasis, right? And we haven't even scratched the surface when it comes to Southeast Asian or South Asian communities, all of which are part of the Asian American experience too.
Yeah. Just another question I wanted to pose to you, because this really does speak to the great American experience, if you will, and the great American dream. And I'm just wondering, and I'm going to ask you from your own expertise, if you will, the accuracy of it. When I take a look at the great American dream from an African American perspective, for example, I think it's not too dissimilar from what I saw in Minari. Am I right in making this assumption? Is the dream the same? In other words, is the dream the same?
Yeah, I mean, I think that actually, when you look at the way that the Minari ends, it's not a happy ending. There's a lot of, there's the fire, there's devastation, there is, but I think you're seeing that Minari, that plant that the grandmother planted, with her wisdom, like by the water, instead of like trying to do all this like other stuff. I mean, you're seeing sort of the resilience of maybe roots that get uplifted, but then planted somewhere else, and what does it take for that to take hold and then not only survive, but then to thrive, and I think that is really a wonderful allegory about like the hard work and the resilience and the grittiness, of plants, but also, immigrants. I think that, the American dream, not everybody is able to achieve it. And I think that, that's, it's complex. But of course, when you're talking about movies and narratives and everybody likes like certain kinds of endings,
Right.
yeah, it's complicated, but I loved that the movie didn't try to make it like, oh, they struggled, but then like now, they have like, 5, barns and 10 cows or whatever it is. I just want to go back to the earlier question though, what you said about 20 years ago, because I think it's right that like there is, it's great that there's more of a pipeline, but why is there a pipeline? And I think that's the interesting thing, that like Amy Tan wrote the Joy Luck Club, and then lo and behold, that became a bestseller, and then they could make a movie out of it. Right now, there's so much creation by content, content creation by people of color, by not just Asian Americans, but if we're focusing on that, there's just. And so they're centering, our stories. We are kind of like the protagonists, right? And so that is creating, more opportunities for things to be turned into screenplays, to be made into movies. But why is that being made? And I think the other thing that's really significant in the last 20 years is around technology and the ways that content is discovered and then chosen, by people. So, 20 years ago, we didn't have, YouTube and Netflix and, all of these different streaming platforms. And I think that's right. Black Panther, Crazy Rich Asians, Minari. I mean, they did have theatrical releases, but now there's a lot more, audience engagement by other platforms. So those traditional gatekeepers, in Hollywood that were saying like, oh no, nobody would ever watch this. You know what? They're being proven wrong.
We're proving them wrong. Exactly.
And that gives, like real credibility and oomph, behind these projects and getting them, put forward. And so I think that has been the big shift in the last 20 years. And
Ken, I think it also brings us hope, not just that. I mean, I'm feeling hopeful that we're going to see a whole lot more that is going to transcend what we see today. I mean, I don't know what the future is going to show, but in the discussion that we just had, I think that we are moving in that right direction. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time and it gets a little upsetting, but I'm beginning to see this natural transition that is moving forward, and that's very encouraging to me.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of like, not like each year it's this, it's like nothing, and then boom, big explosion.
All of a sudden explosion.
Right. Let's see.
Yeah. And I think, interestingly enough, Kyung, when you're saying like the typical gatekeepers, no longer held as much power, I think YouTube in particular played a really, really big role for Asian American content creators, because when, like a decade or two ago, that's really their only outlet. If they couldn't get their script read by a Hollywood person, YouTube was kind of where they went. And a lot of them have actually now been brought into the mainstream because of how successful they've done on YouTube. Like Wong Fu Productions, for example, really started as a YouTube kind of college kids creating their own films, and now they're a full production company on their own. And so it's really amazing, I think, what the internet has done for this whole industry and the Asian American population within that.
Joliana, you raised, that's such a good point, you know, and I think a really good example on the music side is like 10 years ago, Psy, you know, like uploaded this thing called Gangnam Style. And then it's just like people started watching it. And today it's been viewed over 4 billion times, you know, and then it's just kind of, but he was kind of that first generation of K-pop, you know, like K-pop is a lot different and much more accepted as mainstream.
You're right about that. Can I just ask a question about the film? Because there's several lines in there that I really wanted to be able to discuss with you. And one of them is, and I'm wondering if this really has a lot to do with the culture too. When the dad had said, "I'm the eldest son and I have to take care of my family." How much is that? Because there were a lot of issues that took place in that marriage. You know, they went back and forth. I mean, she had a certain viewpoint. She had a certain philosophy about how she viewed the dream. He had a whole different one as well, by any means necessary, basically. And he didn't care at what cost it was going to take. And so I'm just wondering, when I saw that and I heard that I'm the eldest son, I have to take care of my family, that really struck me as being something that was so important to the vitality of the culture itself, and how that was, to me, almost the whole manifestation of why it was so important that he worked that hard to make this farm work. Is that part of what I'm understanding to be factual when it comes to Asian culture?
Well, in Korean culture, I mean, to a fault, the position of being the eldest son is something that is very significant. There's just always also been like a pressure to have a son because, you know, like, I mean, people, that's why there's always been this sort of gender bias too, which is, you know, changing now. But you wanted to have a son because the son was going to, you know, like preserve and protect and carry on, you know, like the family. And then certainly to be the oldest son is, it's a responsibility. It's an honor and a responsibility. And I think, Joliana, I mean, this is not just in Korean culture, right?
Yeah. And I was going to say, I'm the youngest of 3 daughters. So I would say, though, that the eldest child pressure still carries across genders. And yes, there's definitely, you know, kind of like a gender bias from like my parents' generation. But regardless, I think being the eldest carries with it certainly a different kind of responsibility. You know, I'm married to someone who is the eldest son of their family, and who is also Asian American, and there's definitely that added burden, unspoken in some ways, or maybe unconscious on the parents, but certainly a different expectation. It's both an honor, kind of like a double-edged sword, honor and a burden to carry.
Now, what lessons would you like people to really draw from this? This film really does have a lot of nuggets that are important and essential to one's understanding and the compassion of it. And I'm just curious what you each would like to say in terms of how someone who's looking at this piece of art for the first time, what should they get from it? What would be the natural takeaway from it?
Well, I can start. I think the movie just, again, resonates, you know, at a very human level, because people see the kind of determination, you know, how determined they were to make a go of their life. And just, if you recall, they had just moved, right, from
California.
From California, where there were a lot of Korean immigrants. I'm sure there were like, it was more comfortable that way, but he had this dream of like making this farm. And he also had a vision, which was very interesting, because at the time, that it set in, there weren't as many, Korean or Asian immigrants, but he wanted to grow vegetables that would, be for like the H Marts, today, like where like, and that's amazing, right? Because that wasn't really like a market there was a big gap. And so I think just for me, the kind of, the the aspirations and hopes and hard work of and scrappiness, of like being an immigrant trying to make something, and literally, from the land where there was nothing before. But beyond that, I think it is really about just like not giving up, and the kind of resilience of immigrants, and why it's so important, like the contributions that they make to America, and just over time. I mean, whether like we're a whole country of immigrants in a way, and so I think that story was so universal, and I just really it moved me. It moved me very, very deeply.
I agree with that. Dr. Yee, do you want to add to that?
Sure. I mean, I agree with everything Kyung
Sure.
already mentioned. I think I would add that something. I think there was a relationship between the head of household and one of the main characters who was trying to help them find water, a source of water, and how he was using that stick to essentially be like, oh, I can find water using the stick. And Steven Yeun's character was like, this is nonsense, like, is he just trying to pull my leg, or or trying to make a quick buck, and he thinks I'm dumb. But I just thought the way that whole kind of saga played out was quite funny, but also I think intentional, right? Like, why did the director write that in? And for me, I kind of took away that as kind of this journey of an immigrant trying to apply their own knowledge from where they came from, and also meld it, or maybe finding it difficult to believe locals and the local kind of culture of finding water using a stick. That just does not sound real. But in actuality, having to kind of balance this like, can I trust people? How do I how do I build that trust with people, complete strangers? How do I protect my family? How do I still maintain my dignity? And honor the knowledge that I bring from my forefathers, right? And not completely just like wipe myself to be a clean slate and become like everyone else in this town. So I think I like how the characters really highlight kind of how they balance that. And I think oftentimes we're asked to assimilate and be completely like everyone else around us, but that is not who we are, right? That doesn't allow us to be fully who we are. And I think that I would hope that people take away from watching the movie that there's a way to preserve both, right? To kind of, I know people fear change, but I think change is always a good thing. It doesn't have to be seen as a bad thing. And how do we welcome different cultures alongside the existing ones to kind of create a new one? So
I think that's super important. And I was going to ask you, especially when you're on campus, I'm sure that you have the pleasure of speaking with a lot of students who want to be inspired by some of those nuances. And when we see a film like Minari, it kind of just speaks to that role of how we all can achieve, and how we all can persevere, and how we all can thrive. And I think that was the real issue behind, or I shouldn't say issue, but the message behind this film. Because Minari to me represented hope. I mean, there may have been areas where there was not a completeness or something that seemed as though it was going to go in the right direction. But ultimately, I think that it all came together in a way in which there was this hope that was really created. And so I thought that was essential. At least for me, in my own takeaway from this, I just really thought that this was a brilliantly done movie, and it just had so much to offer, so much richness to it, so much heart, and so much integrity too. And so I just loved it. I loved it. I mean, I can't speak enough about it. I did, like I said, I saw it several times during the course of this pandemic. What else are you going to do during the pandemic, right? But watch a lot of movies, right? So why not watch Minari? Right? Well, is there anything else that you want to add to this before we wrap up this engagement? If not, I'm going to say I thank you both, but I would love to give you the opportunity to say one more thing if you care to.
No, I think we covered a lot. I think
covered a lot. Yeah.
Joliana's last point, about sort of like not just getting like enfolded into the supremacist culture or the prevailing culture, but to really have that oxygen to be able to change, hopefully, America for the better, and to change, because we do add something really fresh and not to lose ourselves. I'm sure, Joliana, you must find that with your students, they come to Yale and it's like this wonderful place. And if you're like a person of color, you're Asian American, your parents didn't go to college, I don't know, it must feel very intimidating. And at the same time, you want to say no, you have something to really add here. You're not just trying to erase who you are and just to, take on all the attributes of the dominant culture. I think that is like the whole allegory of Minari, that, that plant, that was something that was something that's going to flourish in America. And I think that is what we all hope and aspire
to. We hope for.
Be a part
Absolutely.
of.
That's so beautifully said. Go ahead, Jillian. I'll let you have the last word then.
Oh, the pressure.
No, listen, I know your students look up to you, so you have a lot to deal with, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I appreciate all the comments. And I think, a film like this really brings a range of emotions. And I hope that, in this age where there's just so much anti-Asian sentiment, that this film will just be a small window, and an invitation into really exploring and understanding more about the Asian American community experience, because it is so vast. I'm still learning myself.
Well, you've taught me a lot, the two of you. I feel like I've been a good student. I hope I got a passing grade. Thank you.
Really enjoyed this conversation.
Oh, this
so
is
much.
Beautiful. It just very delightful. Thank you both. Dr. Joliana Yee, Assistant Dean at Yale College and Director of Asian American Cultural Center, and Yoon, who I've not seen in a million years, President of the Korean American Community Foundation. We thank you both for joining us. This was such a beautiful discussion, and I thank you for joining us on our series of the Ridgefield Playhouse Diversity Film Series. Thank you so very, very much.
Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks, Kyung.
Bye-bye.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And we also want to thank the Aquarion Water Company for sponsoring the Ridgefield Diversity Film Series. Without them, I don't know if we could have handled this. This was such a wonderful occasion for us to be able to talk about this film in such wonderful, casual, and provocative ways. So we thank the Aquarion Water Company for sponsoring this Ridgefield Diversity Film Series. I'm Cheryl Washington, and I will see you again next time.